You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Yeah, Debris was really funny because it was the first time I tried to do crowdfunding, and I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. This is going to be a mess. So I only originally asked for $5,000, which wasn't going to be nearly enough to get the film made. But I'm like, I don't know if I'll be lucky if I get that. And then the fact that we were able to raise, almost 20 was mind blowing. I mean, it got to the point where I'm like, who are all you people, and why are you giving me money? I don't understand.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. Welcome to another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast, voted as one of the best indie film podcasts going today by Indie Film Academy, Podbean, and Mentorless. So, I am actually launching my first ever contest. It's called the Filmmaker Giveaway, and I wanted to put together a little prize pack that I thought would actually help everybody out. So, Mark Stoloff, who runs No Budget Film School, actually approached me, and he's giving away a free ticket to his conference out in LA on August the 21st. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to that. I'm also going to give away a Delco Film Festival t-shirt, a free 30-minute consultation with me on anything you want to talk about, and I'll even throw away a bonus thing in there. I'll throw in a tweet. I'll give you out Follow Friday. Anything you want me to tweet out, whether it's your URL, your project, you can use this anytime. Just let me know. So those four things, if you go to davebullis.com/Dave-Bullis-podcast-contest-giveaway. That's where you can enter. But again, if that's too much to write down, you can just go to davebullis.com. It'll be in the show notes. You can actually go to that and enter through the contest portal, which is through Rafflecopter, and you can submit up to, I think it is a couple entries per day, and you can just and at the end of this, which will be Saturday, August the 6th at 8 p.m., I'm going to announce a winner. So again, that's a ticket to the No Budget Film School seminar live in LA on August 21st of 2016, a Delco Film Festival t-shirt, a free 30-minute consultation with me, and I'll also give you out some tweets and a shout out on Follow Friday for the winner. So if you could, I would really appreciate it if you could mention that. Keep pushing that on Twitter. And on this week's episode of the podcast, my guest is a screenwriter, producer, and director. She co-wrote Tekken 2. She successfully crowdfunded her film Debris, and now she's working on a ton of other stuff, which we're going to get into on the show. This is episode 120 with Nicole Jones Dion.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Nicole, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, Nicole, because I think you're the first person who I've had on who is also a member of the Screenwriting U alumni series. I'm pretty sure you were the first person.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's I don't know why I haven't had anybody else on here yet, because it's that group is always doing great things. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here is because every time I turn around, you're always up to something new. You're always creating some great content. So that's why I wanted to have you on. I think everyone could learn a lot from you. So just to get started, just learning more about Nicole Jones Dion, I wanted to ask, Nicole, what made you get started in screenwriting and the film industry in general?
It's funny because when I moved to LA, a long, long time ago, I don't want to say exactly how long, I'll give away my age, but when I moved out here, my intention was never to get into films or screenwriting. It was to get into the video game industry. So I started out working in video games, and then I kind of segued into comics, and then the stories I was coming up with, people were like, oh, those would make great movies, and I was like, oh, that's such a cliche. I don't want to be that cliche Hollywood screenwriter. And, flash forward, and here I am. So I think because I started out working in that comic book and video game space, a lot of my screenplays and the genres that I'm naturally drawn to are these, like, fun sci-fi action or, horror, just these really fun fanboy type projects. And you can see that in the films that I've done. If you look at, like Dracula, the Dark Prince, which we did with John Voight, that's a very, even though it's a Dracula film, it's more of a fantasy, epic, sword and sorcery type take on the Dracula mythos. And then Tekken 2, which is based on the video game series, I kind of got that gig, directly through the result of Dracula, and then also because I had that tie with the video game industry. And, and then writing for the Sci-Fi Channel, which I did last October. I did an original film for them, which aired as part of their 30 Days of Halloween series. That was called They Found Hell. And now I'm transitioning into directing, and I just directed my first feature, which is called Stasis, which is another sci-fi kind of action film. So it's funny. A lot of people think of me primarily as a horror writer, but the genesis of my career and the start of it is really more in that sci-fi video game type space. So
did you find that, the video game industry, because I actually made a project for the video game industry, kind of, sort of, and what I found is when I reached out to them, a lot of them were kind of leery always about going and making things, about, different projects because of, X, Y, and Z. So I wanted to ask you, Nicole, did you find it's harder or easier? And I know that's a very broad stroke. Did you find it's harder or easier in the video game industry to get your foot in the door than it is the film and TV industry?
It's changed. The video game industry has changed a lot since I worked in it. Just to kind of put it in perspective, when I was doing it, that was during that weird time when they were doing live action video games. So it was almost like a choose your own adventure movie. That was kind of a trend. So now I'm dating myself, people who know that era. And at the time, and that ended up being a failed experiment because you ended up with all the cost and expense of making a movie plus all the cost and expense of making a video game. And so they got away from that really fast. And now with, the way that the computer graphics have advanced, it's like you're getting like these amazing photorealistic results without having to do like a live action shoot. But I would say because of the cost involved in video games, it's definitely easier to do films because you can go out and shoot a little movie on your iPhone now. Whereas with video games, there's, you've got programming and the solid modeling and the video, all the CG that's intrinsic as part of that process. I think it is a harder nut to crack, especially now.
I remember all of those live action video games too. I think there was one called Fox Hunt. And I remember, renting those games. I'm thinking to myself, this can't be the future, can it? And I remember that era where everyone was doing, at least everyone had one. There was another one called Psychic Detective. I remember that one.
Yeah, Wing Commander was kind of the big one with Mark Hamill. That was.
Yeah, I remember that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird time. I think a lot of people kind of try to forget that era even existed.
Yeah, I remember that so well. So, you went into the video game industry and, you tried your hand at that. And I agree with you completely. The video game industry has changed immensely because I have friends who work in the video game industry. And, even when I was pitching some of my projects, things have changed even from 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And now look at us now, Nicole. Pokemon Go is the new the new craze, and they're making a mobile NES system for $60, and I'm sure that's going to be a #1 bestseller as well. So it's like the retro now is making a whole everything's cyclical, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing. An augmented reality is such a fascinating thing. I'm trying to avoid the Pokemon Go phenomenon just because I have this addictive personality, and I know once I get sucked in, that's it. I'm done. There goes my productivity for the rest of my life. But I did play Ingress, which is a platform that it was based on, and I think augmented reality is just fascinating. The gameplay experience is really, really interesting, and I think it could be the wave of the future, at least the wave of the future for right now. It's a fun little trend. I'm definitely keeping an eye on it. Nintendo's market value went up like $7 billion over the weekend just based off this one game alone. So, yeah, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be in video games, film, TV, anything, because it's just the Wild West right now, with all the new cable outlets and Netflix and Hulu and everybody doing all this original content. it's interesting because the rules are all changing, and they're changing daily. And it's like trying to keep, you can't even chase trends anymore because the trends are changing. So it's like trying to figure out, how to get one step ahead of that curve and stay ahead of the rest of the flock. It's fun times.
Yeah, and even with crowdfunding, I noticed all the video games now were just being crowdfunded because they were, basically the company would say, hey, we can't take a chance on these video games. So the developers, would go out and they would go raise funds on Kickstarter. And I was shocked at seeing some of the price, some of the amounts that they were raising, because I was thinking to myself, wow, these. I'm granted these are the head developers, and they're coming out and saying, this is us doing this, but still, I was a little shocked that they were getting the price, the amount that they were.
Yes, well, because a lot of the video game companies, a lot of the board game companies too, are using crowdfunding almost as a way of doing pre-sales for their products.
Yeah.
And it's also a good way to test things, because I do a lot of work now with Sean Cunningham, is the creator of Friday the 13th, and they just did a big crowdfunding campaign for the Friday the 13th video game, which they just previewed at E3 a couple weeks ago, and the gameplay looks amazing. So if you're a fan of, I'm going to do a little pitch here, but if you're a fan of the Friday the 13th franchise, this looks really cool.
Well, and I'm a huge fan of it, so I can't wait for the video game, by the way. But anyways, as we follow your career, I know you obviously translated out of video games, and you started doing more feature films. So how did you get attached to writing Dracula, the Dark Prince?
That one, it's such a long story, but I had met, where to begin? So I had written an adaptation of an Image graphic novel called The Scribbler, which I'd done for Kickstarter Entertainment. They went on to do Wanted with Angelina Jolie and James McAvoy. And so at the time they were going around shopping my script, approaching different directors, and one of the directors that they had introduced me to as a possibility was this gentleman by the name of Perry Teo. And then the writer's strike happened, and that project ended up never going anywhere, but Perry and I stayed in touch over the years, and we collaborated on a bunch of projects. And he had been approached with the possibility of writing and directing this Dracula film, and he's like, I need help with the script. Do you want to come on board? And I was like, absolutely, dude, you're my guy, And so we worked on Dracula together, then we worked on Tekken together, and then he just produced my first feature film. So it's one of these ongoing, long-term relationships. It's one of the things with this industry. It's all about building relationships, finding champions who are willing to go out there and put their necks out for you, and making that really good first impression, and then it'll just carry. You can build a career out of that, or at least get your foot in the door.
So when you got your foot in the door, were you mainly doing like script adaptations, or did you come in with already having some of your own original material already written?
Oh, gosh. I had probably, at the time I did Dracula, I probably had at least 15 specs already on the shelf that had won various contests and had been optioned, but nothing that had actually gone into production at that point. So with Dracula and Tekken and those types of things, those were all writing assignments that I was brought on to either fix existing scripts or develop ideas from scratch with the producers. Yeah, but I would say that Stasis, which is the script, the feature that I just wrote and directed, is the first time I actually pitched an idea and was hired to write my original idea. Everything prior to that had been somebody else had an idea or had an existing script that needed work, which is what 90% of the industry is developing other people's stuff.
So before you wrote before you came on the project of Dracula, you had written 15 spec scripts. So my question then is, Nicole, how did you find the time to write 15 spec scripts?
Oh, you just do it. Well, I have no life, and I think I mentioned I have an addictive personality. So instead of once I actually had to give up video games. I had to give them up cold turkey, which was really hard. But one of the things I use to fill the void then is I just write. I write constantly. I write every day, all the time. I have no life. I have no real family out here in LA. I mean, I have my husband, but all my family's back east, so I don't have a lot of the normal day-to-day distractions that other people have, and I can just immerse myself completely in my work, which is fine because I love it.
So, just speaking about your work, could you give us just a glimpse into your process? Is there a certain time of day you write? Is there any sort of special rituals you go through just to get sort of put yourself in that writing mindset?
I tend to, because I'm kind of a night owl, and I guess because I tend to write things that are darker anyway, I work better at night, which kind of sucks because if you're working vampire hours, it's hard to associate with the real world. But yeah, and as far as rituals, I don't really have any rituals. I do have a treadmill desk that I use just because sitting is not good for you all day. So I like working on that, and then I just do it at night. It's like something about when the sun goes down, that's when my creativity is at its peak.
So do you subscribe to any method, like the USC sequencing method, the 3-act structure, Save the Cat? Do you subscribe to any of these methods? I
do kind of a blend. I do Save the Cat with, what Chris Soth calls the mini movie method, which is essentially the USC sequencing method. I kind of do an overlay of the two, because I found a lot of these structuring tools, they're all very similar. There's a lot of overlap anyway, and if you just look for the things that they have in common, I would say those are the things to focus on. It's like they all have turning points and act breaks and inciting incidents, and there's some subtle differences, but I have found that by using Save the Cat with the mini movie method, that seems to cover most of the bases.
Yeah, I've noticed there is a lot of overlap too, especially with the USC sequencing method and Chris Soth's mini movie method. But I think Chris Soth, I really do like that mini movie method, and I find that breaking it into 8 sequences really does help me sort of plan out the movie, if you know what I mean.
Right, and it breaks it down into these smaller bite-sized chunks, so it's not so daunting. So when you're first starting out, you're not looking at a blank page and thinking, oh my God, I have to write 90 or 120 pages now. It's like, oh no, I just have to get to the next 15 pages. And that's a lot more manageable. I can do 15 pages in a day or two, and then you're like, okay, then we move on to the next day.
So when you're sitting down to write, you sort of what do you sort of need before you write? Meaning, do you need to sort of outline this heavily or write even a treatment, or do you just sort of get a starting point and just sort of map from there?
I'm a huge fan of outlining in advance, and I think this is a really good skill set, especially if you want to be a working writer in Hollywood, because a lot of these producers are not just going to hire you to write the script. They're going to need to see outlines. They're going to need to see treatments in advance. It's a skill you're going to have to learn, so you may as well practice those muscles while you're working on your own specs. For me, I do have this one thing where it's like, I can't write a script until I know what it's called, and it's this weird hang-up I have, so I have to start with a title, and it's so dumb. And the title will change, but I have to have at least a title. And then solid log line, I always refer back to my log line. So first things first, I write the title, I write the log line, and then I start breaking out the bare bones of it, doing like the breaking it up into the 4 acts. It's 1 act, the first half of the second act, second half of the second act, and then the third act. At least having like a sentence for each, knowing what that backbone is for the story, and then I'll start getting deeper into the Save the Cat or the mini movie breakdown. But yeah, I have to have at least a 3 or 4 page outline / treatment before I'm comfortable starting actually writing the script.
Something I found out recently is something where I can't write unless I can build the movie and then break it down again. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of building and rebuilding. And, because I don't know why, but I'm terrible with titles anymore. Like titles to me, you know what I mean? Like I just, if I don't know the title, what I do is I just sort of go past, because I'll end up obsessing over the title, and I'll be like, I can't figure out what it is.
I'll spend a day looking up stupid titles. Another thing I get hung up on, and this is just my weird little brain, I have to know what my characters' names are, and the names have to have significance to the story somehow, which, I can't just call them John and Jane. It's like they have to have a meaningful name. I don't know. It's just my own little quirk, I guess. But yeah, I think, and for me, it's like going back to that log line, even like, if I start to write and it's not feeling like something's not working out, go back to that log line. That always becomes my sanity check. It's like, is this, because you want to make sure it's high concept and marketable and you can sell it and people get it in just as few words as possible. And if I start to stray from that log line, I go back, readjust course, and then dive back in.
Yeah, I oftentimes do that too, where I just put in guard A, guard B. I'm just trying to fly through it. But I think your method has a lot of validity to it, because character suggests plot, and if you have a character and you sort of map that character out and everything, he or she would dictate, what they do. You know what I mean? Because, for instance, a upbeat, law-abiding citizen is going to handle problems differently than, maybe somebody, born and they've decided to take a criminal life, if you know what I mean. And they both have to get something from somebody. They each have incredibly different methods of how to get that thing from that person.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll do too, I'm sorry, I can't remember which book I got this from, but when I'm looking at the outline for the story, it's like you break it down by plot, and then I'll go through and I'll split it out and say, okay, what are my three major characters doing in each of these sequences? And you have your protagonist, your antagonist, and then whoever the emotional character is. Sometimes it's a love interest or a best friend or a mentor, but make sure that each of them is doing something in every scene. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you want to have especially a compelling story, the antagonist is the hero of his own story. So they need to be doing something in opposition to the protagonist every time. And so that's what I'll break it down, and I'll have the plot and then like a one-sentence description about what each my protagonist, my antagonist, and my emotional character are doing in that scene as well. And that helps. And you can start seeing character arcs and theme. Having a theme is also very important, and that's a kind of a controversial topic because I know some people have different definitions about what theme is, but it's just some sort of statement about the universal human condition, working that in somehow. And that's where that emotional character usually comes in, helping resonate, to become a change agent, to bring your protagonist from wherever they are at the beginning of the film through their character arc to the end, to that changed person at the end. And you can figure all that out in the outline. It's so much easier to do it in the outline stage than write your whole script and then realize, nothing changed, or it just doesn't have the heart that it needs. I'd much rather do all of that work up front in the outline stage when it's easier to fix and see those problems.
Yeah, and you're right too, because as I've found, and reading other scripts and even writing my own scripts, the antagonist is sort of the person leading the film, because they're the sort of the ones, in a superhero movie, that's the superhero, meets the antagonist when the antagonist launches their plan. You know what I mean? And you see that in the Avengers movies. So the antagonist, and even in horror movies like Friday the 13th, Jason's the one sort of going through the film, and he's taking out these teenagers one by one up until one of them finds, oh my gosh, where's my friend at? They go look for her, they find her dead body, then Jason springs and attacks again. Stuff like that. You find the antagonist really is sort of the engine of the whole story.
Yeah, and that's why you have to spend as much time developing your antagonist as you do your protagonist, and and make them real, flesh them out. Don't come up with the two-dimensional mustache twirling villain. It's like give them a goal and a motivation and a reason for doing what they're doing, and just to be evil for the sake of being evil. Okay, sometimes you can get away with that, but I think sympathetic villains, or at least empathetic villains, are always much more powerful and much more effective.
Yeah, very true. And you touched on theme. I was talking to another writer about this, about whether the theme should be one word. I've also heard the theme should always be a question. What would you do to achieve your goal? Big question mark at the end there. Because I've seen, like you were saying, it's always a statement about the human condition, and some people have said, well, it should be a question that the movie answers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like absolutes. When it comes to theme, it's like, yeah, sometimes it takes the form of a question, sometimes it's a statement. It just has to be something universal, and that everyone can relate to. And I would also caution against, writing from a soapbox, where you have an agenda that you're trying to preach down onto people. I think that usually falls flat in the telling. I think it's much better to take something like a universal theme and then explore it from different angles and maybe leave the ending ambiguous. It's like, what is, raise this big question, but then maybe there are several answers, and this is just one of many, and I think in the best stories, the antagonist and the protagonist are both trying to achieve the same theme, I guess, or approach that same theme, but from different directions. And, maybe you agree with them, maybe you don't, but at least now it opens a thought-provoking conversation about who we are as humans and that sort of thing. I don't know. It's kind of cool. Yeah,
I think that is an excellent way to put it. And, because, I think when we get better, I think, as I've realized too about when we get better at certain things, like, for instance, you were talking about writing the treatment and the outline, those are skills you need to have. And that's also something that I've realized too, is that the more of what we do, the better we get at it. You know what I mean? That's usually a rule, a rule of thumb, so to speak. And so when we're writing a theme or treatment, or even when we're writing, the script itself, we're always trying to get better at doing those fine details. And that's the trick of screenwriting, because we're always trying to put all these different skills together. You know what I mean? Building a world, building a character, writing compelling action lines, writing compelling stories. It's and themes and all that stuff. That's why screenwriting, I think, is so challenging at the end of the day. Yeah,
and there's always room to grow. There's always room to learn new things and try new skills. I'm always trying to get better. I mean, I'm never, I've had 4 films made and a 5th one that's in post-production right now, and I'm not an expert. I don't claim to know it all. There's always things out there to learn from other people, read scripts from professional writers who are better than you, and push yourself to get to that next level, because there's always room to grow. Absolutely.
And speaking of some of those movies, you had Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge. That movie came out in 2014. So how did you get how did you get aboard that project?
Well, it was the same people who had done Dracula, so it was kind of like Dracula was like a proving ground, and then they're like, oh, well, we'd like to invite you back for Tekken, and Tekken had its own unique challenges, because originally our vision with that one was we wanted to do something that was very, very true to the video game and very true to the fans, because the director who was attached at the time was like a huge Tekken fan, very passionate about it, and we pitched them this awesome thing, and that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to do something different, and so there's been a little bit of pushback from the Tekken community, because they're like, this isn't really a Tekken movie, and I'm like, dude, I wish you could have seen the original treatment, because that was awesome, and maybe someday that movie will get made. It's just, in this case, the producers wanted to do something a little different. So at the end of the day, I'm just a hired gun. You give them you're there to make the producer happy and give them what they want. So I agree with that completely.
That's why I have had friends in similar situations, and at that point, like you just said, you realize you're the hired gun. The producer, it's whatever. Since they hired you, you have to deliver what they're looking for. And I have friends who've had similar situations where they were trying to always force the issue, and things didn't go well. Let's just say that, Nicole.
Yeah, it's like you have to remember, if you're writing a spec, that's yours. You can do whatever you want. But if you're writing for someone else, and your job then is to take their vision and make the best possible version of that vision. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the vision, that's not what you're there for. I mean, you can raise objections or whatever, but at the end of the day, you work for them. It's their idea. Give them the best possible version of their idea that you can.
Yes, yeah, I concur. And, speaking of your projects, we actually should move and talk to you about Debris, which is, your short horror film. You actually raised just about $20,000 on Indiegogo. You raised 330% over your goal. So I have to, ask, can you just give us a little bit, about what Debris is about? And I want to ask you, too, about, your crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, Debris was really funny, because it was the first time I tried to do crowdfunding, and I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. This is gonna be a mess. So I only originally asked for $5,000, which wasn't going to be nearly enough to get the film made. But I'm like, I don't know if I'll be lucky if I get that. And then the fact that we were able to raise, almost 20 was mind blowing. I mean, it got to the point where I'm like, who are all you people, and why are you giving me money? I don't understand. And I wish magic formula was, so I could replicate it at will. And I've done another crowdfunding campaign since then for another short film called Death Date, which was also successful, but not the same runaway train that Debris was. And I think the difference is Debris just had this really cool concept, like a really high concept that people resonated with. And so the concept behind Debris is in the aftermath of the Fukushima tsunami, you have this curse. A down-on-his-luck treasure hunter is out with a metal detector on a California beach and finds a cursed samurai sword that's washed up on the beach from the Fukushima tsunami wreckage. And then he brings it home and bad things happen. But I think by having this, there's people love samurais. There's this huge, cult following, I guess, just around samurais, and the fact that the story itself was based on an actual Japanese legend, and there's been a variety of films made in Japan about this particular sword and the bad things that happen to the people who own it. But I thought this was kind of an interesting approach, because now it's like East meets West. You have this very ignorant American finds a sword, doesn't realize that it's dangerous, and then as his life slowly unravels. So yeah, we made the short film, and I think it's been in probably, it's been in over a dozen festivals, like genre festivals. It's been nominated for a bunch of awards. It won a couple of awards, and so with that one now, I'm trying to turn it into a feature if possible. So I've written a feature version of the script, going out to different producers, see if I can find someone who'd be interested in tackling the subject on a broader, on a bigger scale, because there's interest. I think it's a project that people like and would like to see more of, more of the story, more of the sword, and just make it bigger, do more with it.
Is that online anywhere for everyone to check out?
The trailer is available online. Because it's still technically in the festival circuit, I can't release the film itself. We'll see where things are at by the end of the year, but I think we'll probably finish our festival run by the end of the year, and then maybe we'll either release it, or we're also looking into getting distribution deals internationally, so it might be available on, I don't know, video on demand or something, TV, whatever
Cool.
markets are available out there.
Cool. I definitely think there's a market for something like that. And when I saw, how much by the end, I saw how much this was raising, because I think I donated $5 to this.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Because I checked on it a couple weeks later, and I saw, wow, this is almost ending, and I was like, wow, Nicole is killing it. I was like, wow, they have 330% past their goal. I mean, and I thought, either somebody has a huge contact list, or somebody, I said, somebody did something right, somewhere, either you have a massive contact list, you have a very rich relative donate, money into it.
If only I have no rich relatives, I wish. No, this was definitely like the Bernie Sanders of the crowdfunding campaign. It was a lot of small donations, and they just added up over time. It was really phenomenal just to watch the response to this idea and this little film. It was really gratifying, and it gave us a lot of confidence that we were making a story that people wanted to, see, and that resonated with people. And and that at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. Telling stories that people want to hear, and maybe make them think a little bit along the way.
Yeah, I concur, and obviously, the concept was popular as well, like you were saying, and there's always a crowd for or an audience for horror of any kind. You know what I mean? There's always going to be an audience for horror.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because when I was doing all the research for Debris and then the feature-length script for Debris, I stumbled on this other samurai story, and so I'm like, okay, I have to write this one. It's a true story set in feudal Japan, and that was the script that ended up winning the grand prize at the Palm Street Films screenwriting competition. So it's like I went through my little samurai phase, I guess, and it's great. I love it. I love action films. I love martial arts films, and so it's like. I always caution writers about, pigeonholing, because Hollywood will pigeonhole you. And I'm like, you know what? If this is a hole I got stuck in, it's one I wouldn't mind living in, because I just love that space so much.
Yeah, and you actually, by the way, congratulations, because you just did win the Palm Street competition. What was that? What was that, on Monday, I believe, or Tuesday?
Yeah, I think they just announced the winners like Monday or Tuesday of this week. Yeah, so that's very new, and and that was kind of interesting because I don't normally enter contests because I'm a genre writer generally, and those, unless it's a genre specific competition, that don't do well in these broad mainstream contests. But in this case, because it was actually an action drama, set in feudal Japan with samurais and ninjas, and it's just like all kinds of blood and action. I thought, hey, this one might actually stand a chance, and then it ended up winning the grand prize. So that was really gratifying.
So I know you can't talk too much about it, but. So I wanted to ask, obviously, is what upcoming projects are you working on that you can actually talk about, if any? If any, we can talk about.
Well, let's see. So there's my feature film that I directed, Stasis, which is currently in post. We already have distribution lined up for that, which is really exciting too. So that film's supposed to be ready for AFM, which is in November. And that's kind of it's a YA sci-fi film. It's been called Terminator for Teens. So if you like time travel-y Terminator type things, check it out when it comes out. I think that'll be really cool. What else? Right now I'm trying to raise money for my next feature, which is a horror script that's based loosely on actual events. So I don't want to give too much away about that. But that one, in fact, as soon as I get off the phone with you, I have a call with the producer for that. So that'd be nice to get that started, production, before the end of the year. And, what else? I'm just, I always got things going on. We're still in post-production on Death Date, which was the other short film that I did after Debris. So meeting with my editor next week. We're going to try to lock picture on that soon. And I don't know. I mean, you just got to multiple irons in the fire, waiting for something to hit. Just keep on chugging.
Yeah, that is excellent advice, Nicole. Before we go, I have one Twitter question come in.
Okay.
And that was, Nicole, what do you look for when you're deciding to be involved with a particular project?
Ooh, that is always the $1 million question, right? It's like it has to appeal to me at some level. I don't know. It's hard to say. Because I have this genre background, I love what I guess if it were literature, it'd be called speculative fiction. Basically, it's Twilight Zone type stuff. Those are things that appeal to me personally are things that have really cool twists at the end or are just thought-provoking in some way. I love old sci-fi from like the 70s and 80s when there was like some sort of like social message, but it was buried within the context of the film, you know what I mean? Like with Soylent Green and Planet of the Apes and Logan's Run, those types of films I really like from a sci-fi perspective. On the horror side, I'm drawn more towards what I call hidden realities. So less slashers, more paranormal, more occult, more supernatural type stuff. I don't know. It just has to, something that's cool. Like if it could be made into a video game or a comic book, chances are I'd like it. Because that's my world. That's where I come from.
Nicole, very cool. It's been a pleasure having you on. And before I go, I just want to ask, Nicole, where can people find you out online?
I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. If you like weird news, then totally follow me on Twitter. I'm at Novaris, Novaris. I post all kinds of wacky, weird news stories, conspiracy theories, and every now and then I'll toss in a screenwriting tip just, for good measure. But and I'm on LinkedIn too, but mostly I live on Facebook and Twitter, so that's a good place to look for me.
Yeah, I saw the tweet you just put out. NASA predicts the end of Western civilization.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. Post-apocalyptic stuff, end-of-the-world stuff, conspiracy theories, killer viruses going to wipe out humanity. If you like that stuff, follow me on Twitter. It's full of it.
Everyone, you can always find me at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Nicole, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you the best of luck with everything. And I will see you in the Screenwriting U Facebook group, and we'll be chatting screenwriting there more. And if you ever need anything, please let me know.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. This is great.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.